a bet. That was all it took for Connor Blackwell to change someone's life, though not in the way he ever intended. It started the way most bad ideas do, at a party, with too much whiskey and too much confidence. Connor stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of a downtown Toronto penthouse, watching the city glitter 40 floors below, when his oldest friend, Derek Walsh, appeared at his elbow with a smirk that had always meant trouble. "You know what your problem is?" Derek said, swirling his glass. "You think money solves everything." Connor didn't bother looking up. "That's because it does." Derek laughed, that low, deliberately amused laugh he saved for moments he wanted to needle someone. "Prove it, then." He tilted his head toward the window, gesturing at the street below, where a woman sat on the steps of the old library across from the venue. Even from this height, Connor could make out the shape of her. A paper coffee cup on the step beside her, a thick canvas bag pressed against her side like she was protecting it. "She's been sitting there every night this week. I know because my driver mentioned her." Derek set his glass down on the ledge. "I'll bet you $50,000 you can't convince her to come work for you. Personal assistant. 6 months. And before you say it, you can't tell her who you are until she agrees." Connor looked at the woman on the steps. He looked at Derek. "That's a strange bet. You're a strange man. Do we have a deal?" Connor should have said no. He was 38 years old, ran one of the most profitable real estate development firms in Ontario, and had better ways to spend a Thursday evening than playing games with strangers on library steps. He should have walked back to the bar, refreshed his drink, and forgotten the whole thing. Instead, he handed his glass to a passing waiter and said, "Give me 20 minutes." The woman's name, he would learn, was Anna Reeves. She was sitting on those steps because she had nowhere else to go before her overnight shift started at the 24-hour pharmacy, 2 blocks east. And the library steps were dry and relatively sheltered from the wind that always cut hard off Lake Ontario in early November. She had worked the closing shift that evening and wouldn't start again until midnight, which left her with 3 hours and nowhere to fill them. She looked up when she heard footsteps, and she didn't smile. She had a wide, watchful face with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept properly in a long time. And she looked at Connor the way most people looked at strangers who approached them in the dark, with immediate, reasonable suspicion. "Can I help you?" she said. Connor had prepared something polished on the way down in the elevator. It dissolved the moment she looked at him. "I'm looking for a personal assistant," he said instead. "I have a contract role. 6 months. Full benefits, accommodation if needed, competitive salary." Anna stared at him. "You're recruiting people off library steps. I saw you sitting here and thought I'd ask." "That's not how hiring works." "I'm aware." He crouched down to be at eye level, which he'd learned long ago was either disarming or threatening depending on context, and tried to look harmless. "I know it sounds strange. The role is real. I can have paperwork to you within 48 hours. She studied him for a long moment. The wind picked up and she tugged her jacket tighter around her shoulders. "What's the catch?" "No catch. The salary is $8,000 a month." Something shifted in her expression, not greed exactly, more like the particular kind of calculation that happens when a person who has been counting every dollar suddenly encounters a number that could change the math entirely. She looked away from him, out toward the street, and he could see her working through it. "I have a job," she said finally. "You can give notice. I don't know you. You'd have a contract. A lawyer of your choosing can review it." She was quiet again. Connor waited, which was not something he was naturally good at. "What does the job involve?" she asked. "Scheduling, correspondence, some travel, accompanying me to business dinners and functions as a professional representative." Anna looked at him squarely. "I'm not that kind of assistant." "I know," he said. "That's not what I'm asking for." She picked up her coffee cup, found it empty, and set it back down. 3 hours on library steps in November because she couldn't afford to sit anywhere warmer, Connor thought, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Something uncomfortably close to shame. "My name is Connor," he said. "I'll leave you a card. You can look me up. Take your time. Call the number when you've decided." He set a business card on the step beside her, one of the plain ones, just his name and number, not the company logo, and walked back across the street. He won the bet 3 days later when Anna called. What Connor had not told Anna, and what Derek had stipulated as part of the terms, was the identity of the company, Blackwell Development Group. If he had said it on the street, Anna would have known immediately. Because 8 years earlier, Anna Reeves had sat across a desk from a man named Gerald Blackwell, Connor's father, and been told, in the blunt, efficient way Gerald Blackwell handled everything, that her mother's small architecture firm was being absorbed, her mother's contracts were being dissolved, and that her mother's services would not be required going forward. Anna had been 22 and had come to plead on her mother's behalf. Gerald had dismissed her in under 4 minutes. Anna's mother, Patricia Reeves, had built her practice over 20 years. Losing the Blackwell contract, the largest single account the firm carried, had been the beginning of the end. The firm had closed within 18 months. Patricia had never quite recovered, financially or otherwise. Anna had spent the years since working 2 jobs, sending money home to Guelph, and carrying the particular quiet anger of someone who knows exactly who is responsible for their circumstances, but has no recourse against them. She did not connect Connor on a plain business card to the Blackwell family until her first week in the role, when she walked into the main boardroom carrying a set of files and saw the company name etched in steel letters above the reception desk. She stood there for 3 full seconds. Then she walked back out, put the files on her desk, and sat very still. Connor was on a call in his office. Through the glass wall she could see him pacing the way he always did when he was irritated. Short, contained circuits around the desk, like a man trying to walk off the urge to say something he'd regret. She watched him and thought about her mother sitting at the kitchen's table in Guelph, going over the same numbers every night for a year, trying to find a way out of a situation someone else had put her in. When Connor came out of his office an hour later, Anna handed him the files without looking up from her screen. "Everything's confirmed for Thursday," she said. "The Pearson dinner, your 3 o'clock with the development board, and your call with Vancouver." "Good," he said, taking the folder. He paused. "You all right?" "Fine," she said. She wasn't fine, but she wasn't leaving either, not yet, because $8,000 a month was $8,000 a month, and she had a plan forming that she wasn't ready to name yet, even to herself. The first month was a study in distance. Anna was precise, capable, and entirely impersonal. She anticipated his schedule with an efficiency that impressed even Connor, who had high standards and didn't bother pretending otherwise. She coordinated his calendar, handled his correspondence with a directness his previous assistants had never managed, and showed up to every function exactly as the role required, composed, professional, and with the particular quality of someone who was present without being entirely there. Connor noticed. He noticed the way she kept a deliberate 6 inches of space between them in elevators. He noticed that she took her lunch breaks alone, always outside regardless of the weather, as though she needed the air. He noticed that she never accepted the coffee his office kitchen manager left on her desk every morning, choosing instead to bring her own in a worn thermos from home. He didn't comment on any of it. He was not, he told himself, interested in his assistant's interior life. He had a business to run. What he was not prepared for was the annual gala at the Royal York in early December, the firm's largest event of the year, attended by every significant name in Ontario development, old money Toronto, and the city's political circuit. Anna had organized the entire thing. She had coordinated with the venue, the caterers, the PR team, and the board. She arrived that evening in a simple black dress that she clearly owned and had not bought for the occasion, and she moved through the room with a competence that made her look more at home than half the guests who'd paid $500 a plate to be there. Connor found himself watching her more than he should have. Watching the way she managed his board chair, Gordon, with a patience Gordon's own family never seemed to muster. Watching her talk to the young woman from the city planning office, someone Anna had clearly met before and genuinely liked, because for a few minutes she laughed, really laughed, and Connor realized he hadn't heard her do that yet. Derek appeared at his shoulder. "Careful," he said pleasantly. "You're staring. I'm not." "You are." Derek took a sip of his wine. "She's good, by the way. I didn't think she'd last a week." Connor said nothing. "She did look at you a bit oddly when I mentioned your father earlier," Derek added, almost as an afterthought. "Did you notice that?" Connor had not noticed. But he thought about it later, in the car on the way home, and by the time he got to his condo, he had taken out his laptop and spent 40 minutes that he would not admit to anyone researching Anna Reeves. He found the architecture firm. He found his father's name in the acquisition records. He sat for a long time looking at the date. 8 years ago, 2 months before his father had handed him the company and retired to Muskoka, and he understood, with a clarity that felt like cold water, exactly why Anna kept 6 inches of space between them in elevators. He didn't bring it up the next morning. He didn't know how to bring it up. He was a man who had spent his adult life making decisions and then executing them. And this particular situation did not have a clear decision attached to it. So he did what he always did when he was uncertain. He ignored it and worked harder. But something had shifted in the way he paid attention to her. He started listening differently during their morning briefings. He noticed that Anna had opinions she kept to herself. Small but pointed observations that occasionally surfaced when she thought he wasn't paying close attention. He noticed that she had read the zoning proposal for the Scarborough project more carefully than 3 of his senior planners, because she caught a discrepancy in the drainage specifications that had been sitting undetected for 2 weeks. "How did you see that?" he asked, genuinely surprised. Anna looked up from the document. "My mother was an architect," she said. The silence that followed was exactly as long as it needed to be. 2 months into the role, Anna found a folder. It wasn't hidden. It was in the shared drive in a subfolder under old financials that she'd been asked to archive. Inside was the original correspondence from the Reeves architecture acquisition. Not the sanitized version in the public records, but the internal emails, the negotiation notes, the final assessment written by Gerald Blackwell's chief financial officer that described Patricia Reeves's firm as a minor liability with sentimental value but no viable long-term position in the portfolio. A minor liability. Anna read it twice. Then she closed the folder, closed the drive, and sat at her desk until her hands stopped shaking. She had known the facts for 8 years. She had not known the language. There was a difference. Knowing that something was done to you deliberately was one thing. Reading the exact words that were used to make that decision, seeing how little weight had been given to a person's entire life's work, was something else entirely. She went to lunch and called her mother. "I'm fine," she said, before Patricia could ask. "I just wanted to hear your voice." Her mother talked for 20 minutes about the neighbor's new dog and the leaking roof over the back porch, and a book she was reading about Italian hill towns. Anna listened and said the right things, and when she hung up, she sat on a bench in Nathan Phillips Square for a long time watching pigeons and trying to decide what she was going to do. When she got back to the office, Connor was standing at the window of his office in a way that she had come to recognize. Shoulders slightly tense, jaw set, the particular stillness of someone who has been waiting to say something and doesn't know how to start. He said, "Anna, I'd like to speak with you. Not about work." She sat across from him with her hands folded in her lap and said nothing. "I know about your mother's firm," he said. "I know what my father's company did to it, and I know why you should probably have walked out of this office the first week you were here." He paused. "I'm not going to pretend that the fact that you didn't makes it better. But I want you to know that I know." Anna looked at him for a long moment. "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing," Connor said. "I'm not asking for anything. I just didn't want to keep sitting here while you knew something I knew and neither of us mentioned it." She stood up. "Okay," she said. "Thank you for telling me." And she walked back out to her desk. Connor stared at the empty chair across from his desk for several minutes before his phone rang and pulled him back. The weeks that followed were strange. Something had been named without being resolved, which was somehow more unsettling than the silence before it. Anna kept doing her job with the same precision she always had. Connor kept running his company the way he always had. But there were moments. A conversation in the elevator that ran longer than it should have. A working dinner where they stayed at the restaurant 2 hours past when the agenda was finished, talking about things that had nothing to do with the Scarborough project, where the distance between them shifted slightly. He asked her once, on the drive back from a site visit in Markham, how her mother was doing. Anna looked out the window. "She's managing," she said. "She took up watercolor painting about 4 years ago. She's actually quite good." "I'm glad she found something," Connor said. It came out more quietly than he intended. Anna didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "She never blamed you specifically, you know. She always said it was just business that these things happen." She paused. "I was never as forgiving about it as she was." "That seems reasonable," Connor said. She glanced at him, something unreadable in her expression. "You're not going to argue the point?" "No," he said. "You're right. What happened to your mother's firm was handled badly. I can't undo it, but I won't sit here and defend it either." The silence that followed was the most comfortable they'd had since she walked through his office doors. It was Derek who broke things open again, as Derek, Connor thought later, had a particular talent for doing. He showed up unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon while Anna was at a meeting with the PR team, and he stood in the middle of Connor's office looking pleased with himself in a way that immediately put Connor on edge. "So," Derek said, "the bet. 6 months is up in 2 weeks. I want to know if you're planning to honor it." Connor set down his pen. "What?" "The 50,000, Derek said pleasantly. "You technically fulfilled the terms. She's been working for you for almost 6 months. Are you planning to tell her how it started? Or are you just going to let the contract expire and never mention it?" Connor said nothing. Derek tilted his head. "You've gone quiet. That's interesting. Get out of my office, Derek." Derek didn't move. "Here's the thing, Connor. The woman whose mother your family put out of business has spent 6 months working for you under a contract that started because I dared you to approach her. I just want to make sure we're all clear on what the situation actually is before it becomes something more complicated than a professional arrangement." After Derek left, Connor sat at his desk for a long time. Anna heard part of it. She had come back from the PR meeting early and had stopped in the hallway when she heard Derek's voice. She had not intended to stand there and listen, but she had, and she had heard enough. She sat at her desk and continued working until the end of the day, because that was what she had always done. Continued working, continued showing up, continued being competent and reliable, and present no matter what was happening underneath. It was how she had survived the last 8 years. It was how she had survived most things. But when Connor came out of his office at 5:30 and said her name, she looked up and he saw it immediately in her face. The particular expression of someone who has already processed something and arrived somewhere very cold on the other side. "Anna," he said again. "I'd like to finish for the day," she said. "I'll see you tomorrow." She was not there the next morning. She hadn't gone far. She'd taken 2 days without notice, which she had the personal days to cover, and spent them at her apartment on Bloor Street. Mostly sitting at her kitchen table with tea she kept forgetting to drink, trying to be rational about the situation. She made a list. She was a person who made lists when the world got too loud. On one side, she had taken a job under unusual circumstances. The job itself had been real. The contract had been legitimate. She had been paid what she was promised. The work had been meaningful. She had actually done things that mattered, including the community housing consultation she'd helped push through the planning committee 2 months ago, which was the first project in her 6 years of working for other people's agendas that she had genuinely cared about. On the other side, it had started with a bet. And she was still the daughter of Patricia Reeves, and Connor was still a Blackwell, and none of that had changed. She called her mother on the second day. "There's something I need to tell you," Anna said. "I've been working at Blackwell Development." The silence on the other end was long enough that Anna almost said something to fill it. Then Patricia said, "Oh, Anna, I know. How long? Almost 6 months." Another pause. And there's a man," Anna said, and then stopped, because she didn't know how to finish that sentence without sounding like a person who had completely lost track of herself. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, gently, "What kind of man?" "The kind I didn't expect," Anna said. When she came back to the office on Thursday, Connor was there before her, which was unusual. He was sitting at his desk with his laptop closed, which was even more unusual. "I need to explain something," he said, before she'd even sat down. "Connor, please." He gestured to the chair across from him, and she sat because she had walked all the way here and she might as well hear it. He told her everything. The party, Derek's bet, the terms, the $50,000. He told her that he had gone down to those library steps because he was arrogant enough to think he could approach a stranger in the dark and have it go smoothly, and that he had not thought for 1 second about what it would feel like for the person on the other side of that conversation. He told her that he had found the acquisition file 2 months in, and that instead of telling her immediately, he had waited because he didn't know what to say, which was cowardice. He said that word directly, cowardice, without softening it. "I'm not telling you any of this because I expect it to change anything," he said. "I'm telling you because you deserve to know the full version of how you ended up here And because the alternative is letting you leave with a partial story, and I don't want to do that." Anna sat with it for a moment. "The bet," she said. "Did you collect?" "No." "Did you cancel it?" A pause. "Yes, a few weeks in." "Why?" Connor looked at her steadily. "Because it stopped being something I was willing to make money from." She looked out the window at the Toronto skyline, gray and pale in the February light. She thought about her mother with her watercolors, and her neighbor's dog, and her book about Italian hill towns, who had said it was just business, that these things happen, and who had managed, somehow, over 8 years, to build something worth having out of the pieces that were left. "I need time," Anna said. "I know," Connor said. She stood up. "I'll finish out the contract, and then I need time." He nodded. "Okay." She went back to her desk. "Let's play a little game. For those reading the comments, type maple leaf in the comments. Only those who've made it this far will understand. Now, back to the story. The final 2 weeks of the contract were different from everything that had come before. Connor didn't push. He didn't perform contrition in the way she'd seen other men perform it, with gestures and grand statements designed to make themselves feel better. He simply continued showing up, doing the work, and treating her the same way he had since somewhere around the 3rd month, when he had stopped seeing her as an assistant and started seeing her as a person. On her last day, she found on her desk a folder she hadn't put there. Inside was a letter, handwritten, which surprised her because she hadn't thought Connor was the kind of man who wrote things by hand. "Anna, I've been trying to find the right way to say this for 2 months. What my father's company did to your mother's firm was wrong, not just bad business, but wrong in the way that disregards a person's entire working life, as though it has no value outside of what it generates. I can't undo it. But I've spoken with our legal team, and I want to offer, without any conditions or expectations attached, a settlement for your mother that reflects what should have been paid when the contract was terminated. This is not connected to anything between us. It's simply the right thing to do, and it should have been done 8 years ago. Connor." Anna read it twice. Then, she picked up her bag, said goodbye to the receptionist, and went home. She spent 3 weeks thinking. She visited her mother in Guelph and told her about the settlement, and Patricia Reeves sat at her kitchen table and cried. Not with grief, but with the particular relief of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and has finally been allowed to set it down. They talked for 2 days. Long evenings with wine and old photos, and the particular quality of honesty that's only possible when enough time has passed that the pain has settled into something you can look at directly. On the 3rd week, Anna called Connor. "I'd like to meet," she said. "Not professionally." He said yes before she finished the sentence. They met at a small cafe on Queen Street West, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and too many plants that Anna had always liked and Connor had never been to. He was already there when she arrived, which she suspected was deliberate. She sat down and they looked at each other for a moment. "I'm not forgiving Blackwell Development," she said. "I want to be clear about that. What was done to my mother's firm was wrong, and a settlement doesn't rewrite it." "I know," Connor said, "but I'm not." She paused, choosing words carefully, the way she always did. "I'm not defining you by decisions your father made before you were running the company. That seems like a different thing." Connor was quiet. "It is a different thing," he said, "though I understand if it doesn't feel that way." "It does and it doesn't," Anna said honestly. She told him then about her mother's watercolors. She'd brought one on her phone, a small landscape of the Hermosa River that Patricia had painted last September, colors soft and a little uncertain in the way that beginning painters always were, but with something real in it. Connor looked at it for a long time. "She has a good eye," he said. "She always did," Anna said. "That was never the problem." The months that followed were slow and careful, which suited Anna. She had never been a person who moved quickly toward things she wanted. Trust, for her, was built in small increments. A phone call that ran longer than expected. An afternoon walking along the waterfront when they had planned to be there for an hour and stayed for 3. The gradual accumulation of moments where Connor was exactly who he said he was and not something else. She watched him with people. She had already seen him with the staff at Blackwell, knew that he'd become, over the last year, the kind of employer who knew people's names and asked them real questions, not performatively, but out of what had apparently become genuine habit. She saw him with a mentee, a young developer named Owen, who reminded her a bit of who Connor might have been at 25, and she watched him listen to Owen the way he had never listened to anyone when she first met him. Actually listen, with the patience of someone who had decided that other people's thinking was worth his time. She also saw the version of him that still struggled. The late-night work sessions that were more about control than productivity. The moments when old instincts surfaced and he was brusque and impatient in ways he clearly caught himself on, sometimes in the middle of a sentence. He was not a finished project. Neither was she. One evening in October, almost a year after she'd first sat on those library steps, they were standing on the balcony of Connor's condo, looking out at the city. The lake was dark, and the lights of the islands were reflected in small broken pieces on the water. "I want to show you something," Connor said. He went inside and came back with a small framed photograph, a woman in her late 30s, laughing at something off-camera, in front of what looked like a building site with the steel frame just going up. "My mother," he said. "She was an urban planner. She worked on the original design for a community housing project in Scarborough, back in the 80s. My father bought her out too, eventually. She said it was fine. She always said things were fine." Anna looked at the photograph for a long time. "She died when I was 13, Connor said. "I always thought her version of the company was less efficient. I spent 20 years building a better version of his." He paused. "I think I had it backwards." Anna handed the photograph back to him carefully. "I think you know that now," she said. He looked at her. "Because of you." "No," she said. "You were already figuring it out. She considered it, happened to show up at the point where you were ready to figure it out faster." He laughed, which she had come to love, because it was always a little surprised, like he still hadn't quite gotten used to being the kind of person who laughed easily. That spring, they traveled to Guelph together to visit Patricia. Anna's mother opened the door, looked at Connor for a long moment with the clear-eyed assessment of a woman who had seen considerable difficulty and learned to take the measure of people quickly, and then stood aside and said, "I made too much soup. Come in." Over dinner, Patricia talked about the Aramosa paintings and the neighbor's dog, and a trip she was considering to Prince Edward Island. Connor listened and asked real questions and helped clear the table without being asked. And afterward, when Patricia brought out an album of old architectural drawings, the ones from her practice, the projects she'd been proud of, Connor went through every page with the attention of someone who genuinely understood what he was looking at. Before they left, Patricia pulled Anna aside in the kitchen. "He's not easy," Patricia said quietly. "No," Anna agreed. "Neither are you." Patricia held her gaze. "But I think that might be the point." The following November, on an ordinary Saturday morning when Anna was sitting in Connor's kitchen reading, and he was making coffee with the particular focused expression he brought to everything, he set a mug in front of her and then stood there for a moment not saying anything. She looked up. He said, "I know this isn't a simple thing to ask. I know what you've had to decide to get here, and I know you didn't take any of it lightly." He sat across from her. In his hand was a ring, plain white gold, just a single clear stone, the kind of thing he would have chosen because he knew her well enough by now to know she didn't want anything that announced itself. "I'm not asking because of momentum or because it's the next logical step. I'm asking because I want to keep figuring out how to be better at this, at all of it, and I want to do that with you specifically." He paused. "Anna Reeves, will you marry me?" Anna looked at the ring. She looked at him. "Yes," she said, "on one condition." He raised an eyebrow. "We go back to that cafe on Queen Street West for the first anniversary. The one with the plants." He smiled. "Done." The wedding was small. A June afternoon at a conservation area west of the city. About 40 people, Patricia in a green dress with paint on her knuckles that she'd forgotten to scrub off. Derek gave a speech that was, against all probability, actually moving. Owen from the mentorship program cried openly and was not embarrassed about it. Anna's vows were direct, which everyone who knew her expected. "I came into your life angry," she said, "and you didn't try to talk me out of it. That's not a small thing. Neither is what's come after." Connor's were longer, and then shorter than he planned when he looked at her, and found that most of what he'd written felt insufficient. "You showed me that being formidable and being open are not opposites," he said. "I'm still learning that. I think I always will be. I'm glad you're the person I'm learning it with." They danced on a wooden floor under string lights, while the lake turned amber in the distance, and Patricia Reeves, watching from a chair at the edge of the dance floor, with a glass of wine and one of her good watercolor brushes tucked absently behind her ear, decided that some things, in the end, did find their way back toward the light. The years that followed were the kind that don't make dramatic stories, full of ordinary complications and quiet accomplishments and the slow, ongoing work of two people deciding, repeatedly and deliberately, to choose each other. Connor's company launched a foundation, partly Anna's doing, that funded small architecture and design firms the way Patricia's had once needed to be funded. Anna went back to school part-time, finished the urban planning certificate she had set aside when the money ran out the year her mother's firm closed. She brought Owen onto a community consultation project and found, to her quiet satisfaction, that she was good at teaching. Their daughter was born on a February morning, while the lake outside the hospital window was gray and still. Connor held her first and then sat down heavily in the chair beside the bed, looking at her with the expression Anna had seen on his face only a few times, completely unguarded, completely at a loss in the best possible way. They named her Eleanor. Patricia painted her portrait in watercolor when she was 3 weeks old, and it was the best thing she had ever made. Uncertain in exactly the right places and vivid where it mattered. The framed print hung in their front hallway, and every person who came through their door stopped in front of it, because there was something in it that was hard to name. The quality of a life that had changed course at the right moment, refound its direction, and arrived, after considerable detours, somewhere worth being.